Good morning. My name is Beth Radow from the League of Women Voters. I, along with my co-host Susan Schwartz from the League of Women Voters of Westchester, would like to welcome you today about a discussion about one of life's favorite topics, food. Before we get started, I just want to make sure everybody had a chance to say hello to the people on either side of you. We're going to be here for a while. You know one another? We also have food here, and we want to make sure we don't waste any of it, so please fill your tummies. 100 years ago, women were fighting to get the right to vote, and that was after decades of a struggle. And the culmination of that struggle happened in the midst of World War I, when Americans' loyalty to country and our fellow man involved conserving our food and helping to feed our allies. For those who attend the League of Women Voters luncheons in Larchmont and Mamaroneck, you know I have this penchant for political memorabilia, and I happened to come across these wonderful posters from World War I that came out of the Department of Agriculture when Herbert Hoover was handling the war effort. And in the back, if you just check out on your way out this amazing poster, one is waste no food, and the other is to grow a garden. And this was considered duty to country, that 100 years ago, we were being asked to grow food and to conserve what we consume, not to consume wheat personally. We were going to be sending that over to the people who are fighting in France and Belgium. People were asked to can their food. People were asked to freeze dry their food, etc. But that selflessness was something that the government sought from Americans to get through the exigencies of the time. And people did rise to the occasion. And they demonstrated duty to country by growing their own food and conserving what they grew and sharing food. Now we are battling a war, although this time it is a war to a large extent, and there's some contest about it, but there is no question that we have a war on the climate. And we are contributing to that with the food that we throw away. And there's a growing disparity at the same time of income distribution that will adversely affect our society as a whole if we don't properly nourish the next generation of our workforce, our current workforce, and our older adults. So there's a call to action today. It's not necessarily dropping bombs, but there is a war going on, and food really does have a central role in it. And we today are devoted to connecting the dots between food waste on the one hand and food insecurity on the other. And then we'll discuss how Westchester County is using the underlying facts, to act in the best economic, environmental, and social interests of our residents and as a community as a whole. And moreover, what all of us can do to move things along. So there's the environmental impact that I think many of us here are aware of. The greenhouse gases emitted from food waste make it the third largest contributor to global warming, and this is preventable. Solid waste in Westchester, which includes food waste, gets incinerated. Now, food waste is predominantly consisting of water. So when we burn our waste to a large extent, we are incinerating water. Towns throughout the county, such as Scarsdale and my town of Larchmont and Mamaroneck, have launched food scrap recycling programs that transform food waste into compost. County Executive George Latimer, whom I'm going to introduce in a moment, is here, and he's going to introduce to you the goals of composting food waste on a countywide basis and what's involved. Now, it's a process. We're a large county. But we have the leadership that seeks to get us there, and we're very, very fortunate about that. People who want to start a food waste recycling program in your town are very fortunate because Michelle Sterling and Ron Shulkoff in Scarsdale got the ball rolling, and they've got it down pat. And we in the town of Mamaroneck benefited from them and launched a program with success. On your handouts, they have been very generous in saying, please contact me. They're happy to help any community to get started. So please, they're at the very bottom of page 2, behind the EPA pyramid of how best to use your food, and you should feel free to contact them. We have Leslie Gordon with us today as our guest speaker, who's the president and CEO of our county food bank, Feeding Westchester, and she will discuss who among our residents is vulnerable to food insecurity and the different approaches that are being taken to tackle hunger, including suggestions for how we can assist in that. So before we start the film, I'd like to bring up our beloved County Executive, George Latimer.
I don't know about that beloved stuff, but I'm obviously very happy to be here. I've had the pleasure of seeing this film, and if you haven't, it's a terrific way to frame an issue. And you begin to realize in almost every area of activity that we get involved in, it begins with us either as an individual or as an organization, in our case as a government, in understanding that there's a problem and that there has to be some response to that problem. And there's a number of us who either are in public office now or who have been in public office. Damon Marr, who raised his hand a second ago, was on the Westchester County Board of Legislators, so he is part of the decision process. Joe Carvin is a former town supervisor. Chris Sullivan is a former councilwoman, and New Rochelle, and there are others in the room that I necessarily can't pick out from here. But as anybody who has or is serving in public office will realize, you see a problem, and then the question is, what do we do about it? How do we try to coordinate resources? But it begins with the attention of the population that people believe that this issue is in fact one that needs to be addressed. I'll give you a quick story as fast as I can. The first time I was ever interacted with the issue of environmental protection, my senior year of high school, it was April of 1970. That was the first Earth Day, April 22nd, I think, 1970. I'm a senior in high school, going to start college in the fall. Any of you remember the last semester of your high school years? You did almost nothing. You goofed off as best as you could and get away with and get your degree and move on to that. So it was 7th grade study hall. A buddy of mine, Bob Allen, Mount Vernon High School, came over to me and said, "What are you doing after school?" And I said, "I don't know. What are we doing after school?" He says, "Well, there's a group of people out in the high school field, and they're going to clean up the high school field for the environment." I don't even know if he used the word environment. And I looked at him and said, "Why would I want to do that?" And he said, "There's going to be girls there." And I said, "Count me in." So, cherchez la femme. Bob, George, and a bunch of other guys and girls were cleaning up the area around what is, if you know the Mount Vernon High School field on the other side of the Cross County Parkway. That was my introduction to Earth Day and environmentalism. And you realize now, many years later, almost 50 years later, as we look at the environmental issues, it's not just cleaning up, it's not just anti-litter, which for some of us was the cutting edge of environment in the initial stages of it. It's we're dealing now with climate change and the things we have to do to change our carbon footprint. Well, we are not the United States of America. We are not the global world. We are individuals. We're active in our communities. And in this particular case, I've been given an opportunity for a few years to try to direct county government. So the question that we face in county government is, how do we be a helpful partner on these issues of food insecurity or food security, which is what we're striving for, and proper disposal of food waste? We have, 30 years ago, gone into source separation of state law, and we changed our behavior. Instead of putting in the garbage can at home, plastics, metal, paper, and so forth, we now have a separate method to segment that and have it recycled. For those of you who may remember before that happened, at curbside source separation, the Boy Scouts or the church groups would have newspaper drives once in a while. And if you felt like you wanted to store your newspapers up, then you'd go on a Saturday to this parking lot, you'd dump your newspapers off. That was recycling before it became standardized. So now, and using the example in Scarsdale of what Ron and Michelle were able to do, they were, to my understanding, the first community to do this, they've identified the next frontier for recycling, and that's food waste recycling. And when you consider because I throw out the garbage, you know, Mondays and Wednesdays, Thursdays. What's in the garbage can, you realize how much of it is the scraps of foods that you don't consume. And as you can tell by my waistline, I consume a fair bit of food. And in addition to that, there's a tremendous amount of waste. So now the question becomes, both from the standpoint of making sure that people who are underfed, and Leslie will no doubt have statistics that are certainly shocking when you consider the wealth of Westchester County, and as well the amount of tonnage of what we do burn at Charles Point, that this is now, as George Latimer understood at age 17 on the high school field, this is now the next area where we have to figure out how to do this. The county government is prepared to undertake a study. We've set money aside to do a food waste recycling study. Why do you want to study everything? To determine a host of things. Number one, is the county's role to create a site in Westchester for this. Right now, the site that's being used, I believe, is in Ulster County, and there's a transportation function for every community that's signed on to food waste recycling, that what they have that's collected at a central site is picked up and trucked to Ulster County. Do we as a county decide that we want to do that function internal? And then if so, where and how do we site it? Wish me luck on that one. There are a couple of different scientific methods. Don't ask me to explain them, aerobic and anaerobic. But that will determine what we do internally. And then for the Scarsdales, the Mamaroneck villages, the Mamaroneck towns, every other community, Newcastle, every other community that has started a program, how do we then, as not as a superior government, but as a brother or sister government, how do we help coordinate that in an intelligent way? We are in the first phases on these issues, of this issue of recycling, as we were all those years ago with paper, plastic, metal. But we know that this is the next frontier. And on the food security side of this, we've had a traditional way of doing things. We have soup kitchens that exist where they do. We have food giveaway drives whenever those happen. We have, you know, the group Thanksgiving dinner and the group holiday dinner when they happen. But that's one meal for people who are consistently unable to be fed, you know, appropriately and properly. How do we do that in innovative ways? In the same way that we're changing the way we do everything in the society. We shop differently now. We don't go to bricks and mortar stores. We stay home and do this on the computer. Or we get our news from our phone rather than from a broadsheet newspaper. Well, the way we deliver food security has to change. I had breakfast with Beth, and we were talking about this, and she was explaining to me some innovative ways of things that are happening elsewhere around the country, and places that are way, way ahead of us. Lori's telling me about you know, the way Philadelphia has done these things years and years before we ever started to get to it. So today's mission, and this is why it's so important that the League of Women Voters is a co-sponsor of this, is that it's always been the League that's been on the cutting edge of discussion of public policy issues. And discussing this and figuring out what the best strategy is all of our responsibility. And hopefully what I can do during my tenure, whatever long or short a tenure that is to help make the county government a partner in what these solutions will be. The study will come out, it will lay out some options, there'll be public discussion and debate about it through the League, outside of the League, through all of the different little organizations, but most importantly, that we advance the issue, that we don't turn a blind eye to it. We don't say that business as usual is the appropriate way to operate, but we show the willingness, as has been done at every time in the American experience, to tackle the problem head on and not avoid the problem. So with that thought in mind, we hope to be a good partner. You'll see more about this in the film. Leslie and others will speak. And while I may not be here for much longer, I'm with you on this issue as we go through it. And I look forward to working with each of you. And where I saw the leagues, the river towns and the other leagues, we will work on this together. Back to Beth.
Thank you very much. So next we're going to show the film. I just have a couple of things I wanted to say. Some folks have seen the film. I showed it in March at Larchmont Library. And some people have said that it's on the long side. Wasted is filled with great information and is truly inspiring. And it is 90 minutes long. When I showed this film in Larchmont in March, I was fortunate enough to be able to interview Nari Kai, who is one of the co-directors of the film. That was before Anthony Bourdain took his life. If anything, I would have cut the last 5 minutes of the film just to conserve a little bit of time. But now that Anthony Bourdain is no longer with us, the statement that Anthony makes at the end of the film is especially poignant, and it deserves our attention. So we will show the film in its entirety, and please hang in here. Stay for our speaker, Leslie Gordon, and the Q&A to follow. We're very, very happy to have you here. This is a critical topic, and I will say that in my 8+ years as the chair of the Committee on Energy, Agriculture, and the Environment for the New York State League of Women Voters, where I worked on the front lines to stop fracking in New York, I've had the opportunity to observe and actually experience firsthand that citizen action makes the decisive difference to effect change. Citizen action makes the decisive difference. We can sit on the sidelines or we can stand on the front lines. Everyone here is very politically aware, no doubt. Obviously, we understand that, we have to vote. We obviously all have to vote on Election Day. I brought voter registration forms for people. I also have absentee ballots for people if they need one. But I think if we think about the idea of voting to go beyond what we do on Election Day, we're actually voting every single day with everything we do. Every time you go to the supermarket, you're voting with your consumer dollars. If you don't like what the supermarket is doing, vote with your feet and go someplace else. But first, mention something to the person in the supermarket who manages the store. Why don't you increase what you have in terms of day-old food? Instead of buy one, get one free, why don't you have buy one, get half price, or donate one to a food pantry? Because typically when we buy one, get one free, it sits in our refrigerator, and if we don't store it properly, it ends up in the garbage. I mean, I know that's happened to me, and I think that I'm probably not alone in that. So there are things that we can be doing in terms of how we shop and how we stock our food, in terms of how we vote, and how we vote even with our daily activities. The handout that I put together was really with that in mind. There's a lot of links in there. If you want to put down your name on an address, I can send you a digital version, or you can go through the sort of mundane task of typing it in. But those are all live links, and the information is really very, very helpful. So I just want to say before we start the film that it really is not hyperbole to say that everyone can make a decisive difference regarding the role of food in our homes and in our community. And you can feel really great about it. I've been composting now the food waste that I have. I put it in my freezer. I live in an apartment, and I don't have the luxury of putting it, in a garage. But at the end of the week, I dump it over on Maxwell Avenue or at our farmers market, and I am struck by how little trash I have now. There is virtually no garbage left, maybe a piece of plastic at the end of the week. It's stunning. And I think that as we shift how we sort of create our trash, if you will, separate, we're going to be able to move the county along to a place where one day a week we could maybe even get food waste picked up at our homes, because we can't even justify having trash picked up twice a week. And then if you think forward, there's some communities that do what is called pay as you throw, where we're not subsidizing other people in trash pickup, but we're literally buying a bag, and when you're only throwing out a dirty Kleenex, it's really not all that expensive. And in terms of the expenses and the environment, yes, it's something that will happen over time, but I know that it is something that we're able to do over time. It's a process, and everyone in here can be a part of that. So why don't we get on with the show, enjoy it, and I look forward to speaking to you on the other end. I can't hesitate to recap something. I had this idea of a visual. It's so staggering that they use a couple of statistics, but they say that somewhere between 1/3 and 40% of the food that we grow never gets eaten, it gets wasted. So I've got a bag of peas here. This is 4 cups of peas. So think of this as our food supply. This is how much of our food supply we're wasting. How staggering is that? And this is the food that our food insecure population has when they're trying to make ends meet at the end of the month. This is, to me, you know, obviously it's a very rough illustration, but I think it, you know, I think it sends a message. I am happy to speak to anybody about composting in your community. We've been doing it one way or another in Mamaroneck, and we've been working on it. And as County Executive Latimer mentioned, that there is a study that's going on in Westchester, and it will be a process. But we've got very motivated people who want to reach out to the various communities. It's very doable. And so we encourage you, please, my email address is on there, and also I can introduce you to Ron and Michelle. But I want to turn my attention now, we want to connect the dots to the people in our community who are food insecure. 200,000 people in our community don't know where they're getting their next meal. 58,000 of those are our children. I want to introduce you to Leslie Gordon, who's a fourth-generation resident of Tarrytown, New York, and the president and CEO of Feeding Westchester. Prior to joining Feeding Westchester, Leslie served as a key executive at City Harvest, where she led plans to improve food access and nutrition for 500,000 low-income New Yorkers. And Leslie pioneered a new strategy that doubled the food distributed annually from 30 to 60 million pounds. Leslie will give us more insight into who are the 1 in 5 food insecure Westchester residents, where they live, and strategies for improving the number of people who can be fed through citizen efforts. Please welcome Leslie Gordon.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Beth, and many thanks to Susan and the League for hosting such a really wonderful event and a proactive dialogue about how each of us in our own way can become engaged in efforts that at once is good for the planet, but good for people as well. It's my honor to be joining you here today. As Beth said, I have the pleasure of leading Feeding Westchester, formerly known as the Food Bank for Westchester. We're your county's food bank. And as you heard just earlier, in a county that is often known first for its deep affluence, there is at the same time a poignant level of need. It's 58,000 seniors, or rather 58,000 kids, 44,000 seniors. It's 1 in 3 kids, 1 in 5 adults in this county who don't always know when their next meal is coming from or what it will be. They're hungry. This is not third world hunger, but they may be missing breakfast, they may be missing lunch or dinner. They may be taking on survival tactics, so watering down foods, helping drinks to last longer. And so at the food bank, our mission is indeed to end hunger. But we're now thinking well and strategically moving beyond that. So our interest is in not only feeding people for today, but helping them to feed themselves for the future. And so I look forward to telling you a little bit more about that. We've been in the county marketplace for about 30 years, and we're a transparent organization. And so we invite you to come visit us. Our distribution center, thank you so much, is in Elmsford, New York. And so we often invite you, as your interest dictates and your time allows, to take a behind-the-scenes tour at our distribution center where the work begins. We're on pace this year to distribute about 10 million pounds of good, nutritious food. Just take that in for a minute. What's even more astounding is that the annual need for food right here in Westchester County, right where each of us reside and are part of the community, is nearly 20 million pounds of good, nutritious food annually. Translated, that's about 17 million meals that are missing from our neighbors' plates on an annualized basis. it shouldn't be happening. There is so much that we can be doing together to make a difference. And it's not just an apple, it's not just dairy products, it's not just canned goods, it's the promise of a better life. An apple, a nutritious meal means all the difference in the world to the people who we serve. It's hope, it's possibility, it's stress reduction, it's assurance that their kids have all the good food they need to continue to be successful and productive in school where they are today, but also healthy adults for the future. There's a huge evidence base, things that we already know and have known for generations about the fact that when you start kids, our young people, our future generation, the folks that hopefully will occupy these seats tomorrow and in the future, in order for them to be productive, they need to have the good access to good food today. But the good news is there's a lot of good work going on right here in the community in which you live in these spaces, and so allow me to share that with you. I don't know if you're aware, residents of Greenburgh may know about this, but the town of Greenburgh approved a resolution well over a year ago now, encouraging the New York State Legislature to approve an Excess Food Act, which makes an imperative for large food generators like our big box stores and supermarkets to consider, or go beyond considering, giving their food excess to people who need it. And so there's some work being done on that in our New York State Senate. New York State passed what's called a Farm to Food Bank bill in January of 2018, which allows our New York State farmers to get up to $5,000 in a tax credit for donating excess product. There's the Farm to School Food Bank bill. And so that encourages food banks, the Department of Education, and agricultural producers to work together to make sure that kids have access to good, nutritious food. And there's a Food Rescue and Recovery Act that's gaining a fair amount of traction, and there's an awful lot of active dialogue going on right here in Westchester County, but across New York State. It's a focus on, again, large generators, but it goes beyond supermarkets. It's large restaurants, hospitality, colleges, and of course, retailers. And then in 2016, on the federal level, the Obama administration set a target to reduce U.S. food waste by 50% by the year 2030. Of the 10 million pounds that we are pleased to be able to connect our residents with this year, more than 4 million pounds of that is food that happily Feeding Westchester will rescue from nearly 80 retail partners and wholesale partners across Westchester County and one in the Hunts Point section of the South Bronx. It's your Acme's, your Stop and Shops, your ShopRites, your Trader Joe's, your Whole Foods, your BJ's, your Costco's, your Walmart's, your Target's. We have a fleet of 8 refrigerated trucks that strategically and efficiently crisscross Westchester County 6 days a week. We are counted on as a reliable and strategic partner. Our drivers back up to the docks of these retail partners. They're expecting us. This is food that's perfectly fit for human consumption. It's good fresh dairy, meat, poultry, canned goods, you name it. And then nearly 10,000 volunteers spend time with us in a number of different ways during the year, inspecting that food, sorting it into like categories, and then it goes up on our inventory and is made available to a some 300 partner network that we're at the heart of right here and in Westchester County as Feeding Westchester. Those are our on-the-ground food pantries, soup kitchens, shelters, senior centers, after-school programs, schools, you name it. And some of you may be volunteers and committed to those initiatives on the local level. So what we do couldn't happen without the partnership of any number of programs across Westchester County. About retailers, it really takes the sum total of the public and private sector to make this happen. And we go deeper. So as you saw in the film, knowing where your food comes from, having a holistic perspective and a healthy respect for food will ensure that we waste less. And so we have a farm at Feeding Westchester. We have a master agriculturalist, I call him. Lovingly, internally, we call him Farmer Doug. And so if farming is your thing and you want to know more about how to grow healthy soil and produce productive crops, we have several different farms throughout the county in partnership with the county jail, the Ronald McDonald House, the School for the Deaf, the Westchester Land Trust, Rising Ground, which is formerly called Leek and Watts. And so we need your help. They're growing great, nutritious, organic food that spins off into those programs, and then we take the excess at Feeding Westchester and connect it to people. We're also doing nutrition education to help people understand when you're on a limited income, how do you eat healthy? How do you convey to your family, young people in your family, the knowledge, confidence, and skills to shop, cook, and eat healthy when every penny counts? And so we have a registered dietitian on staff and someone else with a master's in nutrition who rove throughout the county teaching an evidence-based curriculum that in a fun way is called Just Say Yes to Fruits and Vegetables. It's a free workshop, and so if you're interested, I encourage you to think about joining us and attending. And so there's so much that we can do together. I don't want to take up too much airspace and time because I want to encourage you to ask as many questions as you like. But come visit us, learn more. How do you participate? So you can volunteer, you can advocate, you can donate. Volunteering looks like spending time with us at our distribution center facility in Elmsford. You can attend a volunteer nutrition education workshop if you wish. You can volunteer on our farms. Advocating. One of the biggest things that we're watching on the federal level, which can have really significant and deleterious effects for our neighbors right here in Westchester County, is something called the Farm Bill. It's also called the Nutrition Bill or the Agricultural Bill. It comes up for reauthorization every 5 years. And we're in the thick of reauthorization right now. The Senate has crafted their version, the House has crafted their version. They are very far apart. And the House version stands to position those who receive social benefits like SNAP, formerly called food stamps, positions them to lose a significant amount of their benefits and add increased levels of work requirements, including those for seniors. And we really don't even know how we would accommodate asking all those people to spin off into the workplace when there may not be a good state of readiness, including skills and capabilities. It's serious. And so I encourage you to continue to watch how the Farm Bill is moving. If you're interested in learning more and staying afoot on that, don't hesitate to contact us at Feeding Westchester. You can learn more at feedingwestchester.org. The House and the Senate have picked their dual team that will now hash out the final version of that Farm Bill, but it could be serious. And one of the first things that we would see as a result of significant cuts would be more people standing on lines at food pantries, soup kitchens, et al. Across the county, more kids who are going to school hungry, being hungry during the summertime when school is out of session, and potentially more kids hungry on weekends. There's lots that we do at Feeding Westchester, for example, talking about kids for a second, to make sure that they've got access to good, nutritious food on weekends and when school is out of session. There's something called the Backpack Program, which has about 6 to 8 meals that kids go home with on weekends. We distribute them through schools or other after-school programs to make sure that they're healthy. But here's what's also serious, is not only focusing on the Farm Bill, but focusing on diet-related diseases. So what transpires in our current food system, and it's real, is that the center aisles of the grocery store is where the food is cheapest. And when you're on a limited income, you tend to avoid the perimeter of the grocery store where the healthiest food resides. And so you're relegated to mac and cheese and all sorts of other things that are laden with heavy amounts of fat, sugar, and salt. And so not only are our neighbors who are struggling with not getting enough to eat and good nutritious food, they're also struggling with very real malnutrition. And we're not talking about third world hunger again, but we are talking about very serious malnutrition. And so that gives rise to high rates of diet-related diseases and cardiovascular disease, hypertension, diabetes. It's serious. And it starts early. So we're already giving rise, when our young people don't have access to good, nutritious food, to future generations, adults, who will struggle with diet-related diseases. And you know what happens? So you don't feel good, you're sick, you miss work, you risk losing your job. It becomes a vicious and very stressful circle that is really tough to combat. And so at Feeding Westchester, we are working diligently with healthcare institutions across Westchester County to ensure that those that are struggling with diet-related diseases have access to the food that they need to live healthier lives, and to share it with the family and impart what they're learning with family members and generations. So we have the pleasure of partnering with the good folks at Open Door and Phelps Memorial Hospital and White Plains Hospital and Westchester Medical Center et al. So the problem is frankly much more expansive and much deeper, and it impacts all of us. Even if we ourselves are not food insecure, we're all paying for the complex problem of food insecurity that resides right here in the county. I have some maps, and so I'll leave these at the back of the room, and at your leisure and as your interest dictates, don't hesitate to pick up a map. But what I want to illustrate by leaving these maps is that hunger and food insecurity does not only reside in the places that we often think about here in Westchester County. It's not just the city of Mount Vernon, where, believe it or not, nearly 25% of the people that reside in Mount Vernon are food insecure. It's not just the great city of Yonkers, it's Peekskill, Montrose, Buchanan, Ossining, Mount Kisco, parts that touch Brewster. It's Portchester, New Rochelle, Larchmont, Mamaroneck. There is virtually no census tract that remains untouched by food insecurity in some measure in this county. And so to illustrate that, I have a map here today. Finally, September, where we are right now, is Hunger Action Month. It's a month where Feeding Westchester and all food banks across the United States go orange to elevate and bring attention to the conversation that's needed around the fact that so many of our U.S. citizens don't have enough to eat. And so at the back of the room, we've got 30 ways in the 30 days of September that you can join us in raising and elevating that conversation and actually participate in it. And I see Tyler from Pace University, so a big shout out to Pace University's Pleasantville campus. We'll be there on Sunday, September 23rd for Miles for Meals. It's a way for you to bring your families across generations, bring your dog, bring your kids, to say that it matters. It matters that all of our neighbors are connected to the food that they need to live productive and thriving lives right here. And so if you're interested, you can take a flyer on that as well. So happy to take any questions.
Do we have any questions? I've got some comments, but why don't you, let's see whether or not you need a mic. If you want to shout out your question, we'll repeat it.
First of all, thank you for that presentation. You're a wonderful speaker. It's very enjoyable. I just have I'm wondering how food insecurity is measured.
Sure.
How is food insecurity measured?
Thank you. So we have the benefit of a professor at the University of Illinois who's come up with a formula or an algorithm that takes into consideration a set of data points. So it includes things like home ownership or lack thereof, unemployment, underemployment, household income. So they run that through a formula, and it spits out the level of food insecure people by census tract all across the United States, which is what fuels our hunger heat map that I'll leave at the back of the room. What I tell people, though, honestly, is if you see people standing online at a food pantry or a soup kitchen or kids having to have access to to meals after school, that's hunger. People don't just stand online in all kinds of crazy weather for, a bag of food just because it's fun to do. And I hope that helps answer your question a little bit.
Governor Cuomo has come out, I think about a week ago, to supplement an existing program, although I think the program is defined by whatever the definition of poverty is in that particular area, but they're also going to be providing breakfasts in schools for children, but also on all the CUNY and SUNY campuses, they're going to be putting in food pantries by the end of the semester, which is excellent. The comment I want to make, I'm in private practice as an attorney, and I have clients. It's a real estate finance. I do commercial work, but I also do residential work. And I was one of the attorneys back in 89, 90 that started what is now the elder law section of the New York State Bar Association. So I work with older adults also, or children of older adults. You know, we don't necessarily see people who are food insecure standing on a line to get food. We've got people in very affluent communities who are living on a fixed income. And there may be physical reasons why they can't get out of the house. I know we've got houses of worship that are very sort of keyed into people in the community. But I guess my point is, food insecurity happens right under our noses. And it's happening in every single community, and it could be your neighbor to your left and the neighbor to your right. It could only be for just a month at a time. It could be somebody in business for themselves and their own clients don't pay them. I mean, I actually do have that experience. Sometimes my clients can't pay me on a basis, you know, on a monthly basis, and that has a ripple effect to me. So I'm very sensitive to the fact that this is much more pervasive than maybe even the statistics show. And just a level of sensitivity. You may even have somebody in your neighborhood, maybe you just sort of notice and you can bring over macaroni and cheese one night, or, you know, one of these wonderful fishes that, you know, they talk about in the film. Just something to think about. This heat hunger map is fascinating, though, and I think if you could just say a couple of words about it, I think people would really benefit from knowing how it works.
Sure. So it gets updated about every year. There's some national census data that is part of the formula that I described earlier. But what is impressive in some ways, and not all positive at that, when you're looking at the map, is that if you look at the key on the bottom, you'll see you know, where the yellow or oranges or burnt umber colors are on the map. And it becomes quickly apparent that food insecurity resides in almost every part of Westchester County again. So it's not those folks that or those areas that we immediately tend to think of. And there isn't on this map, by the way, a census tract where food insecurity doesn't reside. What doesn't show up on here is that there is literally one census tract, and it's someplace in Scarsdale, New York, that doesn't resonate with some level of food insecurity. But sans that area, there is a substantial portion of the population that's going without. And to Beth's point, food insecurity doesn't necessarily mean every day. For some portions of the population, they are what we call, you know, high levels of food insecurity. And then there's sort of, you know, medium levels or low levels of food insecurity. But to be fair, it's about social justice. No one at any given time should ever go without having enough access to good, nutritious food. And so that's what the hunger heat map is about. There aren't always touch points on the ground, meaning a food pantry and or a soup kitchen to service a community. And so that's where Feeding Westchester goes to work, and we go direct to people to deliver food. We do that through something called a mobile food pantry, very literally, a food pantry on wheels. And so if you're interested in volunteering for that, don't hesitate to let me know. And then a little over a year ago, we started a free fresh produce distribution in similar areas called fresh markets. The first of them was in Mount Vernon, and we're now moving to other communities. Nearly 40% of the food that we distribute annually to people who need it in Westchester County is none other than good, fresh produce. And it's not just potatoes, onions, carrots, cabbage. It's magnificent product. It's pineapples, mango, haricot vert, asparagus, artichoke, you know, stone fruit, so peaches and nectarines and apples. And we're glad to be able to make that happen. About 30% of that is food that we rescue from our nearly 80 retail partners, and the remainder of that comes from our new wholesale partner, which is the world's largest wholesale produce terminal based in the Hunts Point section of the South Bronx. So I assure you there is very little food that is low in nutrition that moves from Feeding Westchester to our neighbors.
There are also community gardens around the county where people who grow for themselves also generously donate. And it's an opportunity at a local level. If you don't have one, you might want to establish one in your area. We're looking to do that in our community, and they're wonderful models in New Rochelle, for example, and elsewhere. So that's another option.
Yeah, oh, sorry, yes.
I think it's through our involvement with the Giving Circle of Lower Westchester, which is a partner of yours, and thank you for helping to give to food pantries. I think it's through them that I've heard that because of fear of immigration, deportation problems, that some of the food pantries are seeing a drop-off. Are you seeing it? Are people coming because of fear of enforcement? Are you seeing that, and what can we do about it?
So the question is there an increasing level of fear among the people that we serve about immigration issues when they access food at a point of distribution, a food pantry, a soup kitchen, a shelter? What do we know about that, and what are we doing about it? So firstly, we are very data-centric at Feeding Westchester, and so we keep our finger on the pulse on a fairly regular basis about what's going on in the landscape of people who are in need in the county. And by way of answering your question, one of the ways that we do that is that our some 300 partners report to us every month the number of adults, children, and seniors that we're serving. And so are we seeing it? Yeah, somewhat. You know, in the aggregate, it's, you know, there's a lot of conversation going on about it across the network. For some time, interestingly, the food pantries in the northern portion of our county were experiencing it more than the southern portion of the county. It's something that we're continuing to watch. We haven't seen a precipitous downslide, though, in the number of people accessing food by virtue of looking at the monthly statistics that we get from our pantries. We do an annual agency conference where we bring all of our partners together. And so one of the themes of that conference this year is actually about immigration, and we're going to do a fair bit of education among our partners about what ICE or local police departments can or cannot do when folks are accessing food, so that they're well informed and can create at once a dignified and comfortable and protected setting for those who need access to resources. But that's what we know so far.
Lauren?
Thank you guys so much for doing this. I'm going to have to leave soon, but if you like this, wait, there's more.
Yes.
Do you
want to talk about that?
Why don't you come up here for a second?
So I left flyers in the back already too. Thank you. Sure. So today I do a lot of environmental work in the county, but my name is Lori Fontanis. So I'll give you one hat. Today I'm here on behalf of Manhattanville College, but I'm from the city of Rye. I'm a conservation commissioner there, and but I met Beth through Manhattanville. And we are hosting another food justice event. This is our second annual for September 29th. So it's within this month. I had no idea. Actually, it's perfectly timed. Exactly. And two pieces of our panels will be one also on hunger, and you're going to have Leslie back, but a couple more people. So looking at the whole food chain, as it were, of hunger, and very specific actions we can all be taking. But then I'm also moderating a food waste panel. So some of the people, we want to get beyond just talking. We really do want Westchester to be doing this stuff. And Ron and Michelle from Scarsdale have already been doing model work on this. But as George said, I came from Philly, where my grandmother was doing food waste composting all the time. It was a routine thing. So I know we can do it here. So we're going to have people from New York State. We're going to have people from the county. We're going to have people who do residential and educational level food waste stuff. So if you guys are interested, there are flyers in the back. It's September 29th. But the food thing, totally could not agree with you more. It is a diverse, complex, huge project for everyone. We can all be doing stuff in so many different ways. And thank you for the work you guys are doing.
The other benefit of this event at the end of September is that there'll be networking opportunities. There are really excellent business opportunities coming out of this for people who have an entrepreneurial spirit. There are young people in businesses. I've been studying that. So for people who want to handle a couple of jobs here and there, there's opportunities to look into that. And there's also going to be a meal, locally sourced meal. I think it's $25, Lori, is that correct? So anyway, it's going to be, the first program starts at 2, and I think then there's maybe a break in between. The next one's at 4, then there's cocktails, then there's meals. And we will have solved all the problems by the end of the evening, so that I hope that you will join us. Are there any more questions? We certainly welcome them. Susan, hi.
We just want to remind everybody that this video belongs to the League of Women Voters. Anybody wants to sign it out, to show it at a group, just let the League of Women Voters in Westchester.
So Susan mentioned that they generously purchased Wasted, and if people want to borrow it, they can sign it out and use it. And also, there's the Vote 411 card up there, which can link people into the system about all the information on voting. Did I get that right? And obviously, we've got a very enlightened crowd here. Just the one thing I want to say also about voting for yourself, to the extent you might know someone in your community that maybe can't get to the voting booth, if you have a car, see if you can drive them there. Yes?
Do you know if the film is available on Netflix?
Oh, absolutely. This film is available. In fact, if you type in Wasted, the documentary, because people get wasted in all sorts of ways, as they indicated in the film. You can download this on Amazon and Netflix and all the rest of it for something like $1.99. So it's absolutely, and you can get it in the bleeped version, which we saw, or the non-bleeped version. But I think you kind of got the idea. Hi.
I just have a quick question about composting. Are there municipalities other than Mamaroneck that are composting?
Scarsdale, I believe Bedford, Rybrook, now the village of Mamaroneck, and I'm sorry, Newcastle, sorry? Greenberg, Newcastle, so everybody, there is, now the way it's working this far is that people are dropping off their composting. You need a critical mass of people in order to be able to justify picking it up. And it's what we've seen, at least in our community, and this is through my sustainability collaborative and our town administrator, people come to rely on pickup twice a week of their garbage. But as I alluded to before, once you start, and I firmly believe we've got to get this in our schools, and I've been talking to George Latimer about this, and I've got some ideas about how to do this. Parents are inspired by their kids. The kids bring it home. It's mandatory. We're going to be renegotiating the contract for trash pickup in the next year or two. These things are synchronized, and there's some sort of policy work that's done around that. We can then get people to see that this is really not that hard. And if you pull the food out of your waste stream, and we're already recycling the paper and the tin and the glass and all the rest of it, you literally have very little garbage. And then you can't even possibly justify having the garbage truck come twice a week to pick it up. Then you might be able to justify having a truck, whether it's the same one or a different one. I don't know, how that all works. Some people might have to be privately. I think we'd have to work out those details. But then you can justify picking up your trash one week, then picking up your food waste, which I think they're trying to do in Scarsdale right now. But there are economies of scale that we've got to get to. And then, as I mentioned before, if we can get to pay as you throw, where you're literally just throwing out one or two things, then we really start to get to be much more efficient about how we're spending our money. And of course, we all care about how we're taxed in Westchester. So there are economics here also. But it is really not that hard to pull food waste out of the waste stream. Once you start doing it, it's truly a no-brainer. And and it doesn't smell anymore. I mean, there's so much about it that makes so much common sense The other thing in Mamaroneck that we've done, and I know that they've done this in Scarsdale, is that we had a compost give back day, just to show people that, you know, this is sort of the circle of life kind of thing. We gave out compost. I have a couple of trees planted, they're city trees, and we use the compost for the trees. The flowers are just so beautiful this year. The compost, he wasn't kidding, it's gorgeous. It sings to me when I take it out of the container. It really is a happy experience. And living in suburbia, particularly in an apartment, you know, that's a nice experience when you don't have a backyard to be able to do that. It really brings out a sense of community and all the rest of it. So there's so many benefits for doing this. The people who are working on it are terrific people. And so this is all very, very doable. And again, I mean, to the extent you haven't started it in your community, please don't hesitate to get in touch, because there are people who really want to be able to help. So on that note, thank you all very much for coming, and come on the 29th.